Good evening and welcome to the Public Service Committee meeting for Monday, August the 19th, 2024. The time is 5:30 p.m. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our July the 15th meeting. Any comments or changes to those?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from July 15th.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes from our July 15th meeting have been approved. Next item on the agenda is public participation. Seeing none, we'll move on to water. And the first item under water is the project updates.
Thanks, Tom. First up on the project update list is the water treatment plant improvements phase 1 project. I don't know if you guys recall, there were some issues with the new treatment that we implemented. We've worked through all those with the contractor. It seems like they've all been resolved and they replaced some parts and got things operating as it should. So we're just working on a few punch list items with them right now, but it should be wrapped up soon there and everything's operating and functional. So that's good news. The water treatment plant demonstration project, we're currently working with the engineer on the plan for that still. That'll have to be sent to the EPA for their approval, and then we'll actually do the demonstration study, send another report to the EPA, and they'll approve the new higher rated capacity for our water plant. So we got to we sent the consultant some data on our water chemistry and everything, and they're working on that plan for the EPA now.
Does the EPA have a timeline on their answers on both of those?
So what I've seen is they say 30 to 45 days, but I have heard that it has been longer lately, so it kind of depends. It's not a promise 30 to 45 days, it's a, we think it'll be about that.
Okay.
So for the Tolbert Street improvement project, 60% design is completed, and 90% is scheduled early next month, so that's moving along. Most likely that legislation will be coming to you guys in the next couple months to authorize bidding and awarding that contract, so we can get construction started likely early next year. The water system looping project, that project we have received the 90% plans and they are currently working on final plans, and those are due next month. That project isn't in the budget for construction this year, so it'll sit until the budget for next year is passed and we get authorizing legislation to bid and construct that. So once that's kind of wrapped up, it'll be on pause for a little bit until that all happens.
So it's not going to happen this year for sure?
No, nope. And then a newer project on the list is the Bird Street pressure reducing valve, or PRV. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that project, but we're installing a PRV at Bird Park by the tower there so that it connects our high pressure and low pressure zones. So in emergency, or if the tower is down, we can feed water from one zone to the other. That's currently in design. We just got a contract recently for that, but it should be designed finished in late October. There's no budget for construction this year, so it's in the similar pattern as the looping project where it would be constructed next year.
Okay.
Yep. And that is all I had for water project updates. Did you guys have any questions?
I have a few questions.
Okay.
When we took our tour, and I brought up some questions about what the Ohio EPA versus what is needed, because we've been forewarned that there's a large amount of money being set aside in the capital project for water. And so I'm looking to discern which projects are required by the Ohio EPA and which are maintenance or updating the system because it's becoming old. I'd like to know what the difference with the projects are, and when the licenses are up, what we're talking about, and how often that is, and what have we committed to in the past that creates an obligation for the city, a financial obligation. We'd like to know that when you get a license, if there's anything that's financially obligated, and want to be able to discern those two things, which is improvements and upgrades and versus which is the Ohio EPA.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, so we do have, were you wanting to field that question? I can at least give what information I have, because being the water plant, I don't fully know the license and everything like that. There are some projects that are coming down the pike from EPA. I know in talking with Dana, our water treatment plant superintendent, he informed me that there are some things on the list that may not have EPA violations, but it's because we have it in our water treatment plant general plan, which was written in 2020, well, approved by the EPA in 2020. It started in 2019. So not everything in that plan is mandated by the EPA. Some of it is mandated by the EPA, and then some of it probably would be if it wasn't in that plan, but there isn't an official mandate for it. But
That's good to know. Thank you.
yeah. Matt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to the licensing. I did have an opportunity to speak with Superintendent Moore out at the water treatment plant a little bit about the current plant licenses, and I would categorize them as three in my understanding. There's an annual license to operate the actual plant, produce water, if you will. That is entered into every year. Usually by November 15th is when the application is applied for the following year. That has no obligations tied to that particular license. It is strictly an operation of the plant license in that regard. The second license that they have is pretty similar to the wastewater treatment plant license in the fact that it's an NPDES license. It's different in that it looks at different things than a sanitary plant would look at. And it is primarily for the sludge lagoons out back of the water treatment plant. The last license that the plant holds is actually through ODNR. It is renewed every 5 years, and it's because there's a dam on those sludge pits, if you will. So it's strictly a dam permit for those kind of things. So those are the three licenses. None of those licenses carry with them any particular fiscal obligation or EPA mandate that we do certain things tied to the license. And I want to make sure I clarify that, because I know when we talked about the wastewater treatment plant license and the plan for upgrades and SSO related remedies, we did tie that to the wastewater treatment plant license because it was beneficial for the city to do that and come up with a plan that works through the licensing process rather than expose us to potential liability through the US EPA or some other SSO type remediation program. So it was strategy on the part of the city to tie that to the wastewater treatment plant. The water treatment plant licenses are not the same animals, if you will. They don't have those tied to them. However, every 3 years, the EPA comes out to the water treatment plant and does what I would call an inspection, for lack of a better term. And that is where they are really looking at all aspects of the water plant from a standpoint of compliance with EPA regulations and rules. And they create what's called an EPA survey based upon that. And that survey, which has been ongoing for years and years that we've had a water treatment plant, that is where we receive violations or notices of violations as in regards to compliance-related deficiencies. And so we've had those over the years, and those are some of the things that were incorporated into what Gina referred to as the water general plan, if you will, and some of the things that Superintendent Moore speaks to in the tour, as well as things that we need to do, things like carbonization of the water, things like flocculators, those types of expansive treatment plant related processes that need to be resolved in order to become more compliant with the rules for the water treatment plant. So those things are generally categorized in the different phases of the general plan of the water treatment plant. And those are the things we've been working through when we come to council to seek authorization for, and things that we added into the capital improvement budget so that we can accomplish those things in accordance with our water general plan that was approved by the EPA and stay away from issues of conflicting compliance in regards to those items. So it's important that those are incorporated into a plan, not only a financial plan, but the general plan for the plant. So the types of things that are there. Those are the categories of items that carry with it penalties or compliance-related conditions that could cause us issues as we go forward. Many of those can be mandates if they are found to be a lack of compliance, but they're also best business practices, if you will, for creating water and producing water like we do for our community. So Those are some general items that I thought were responsive to some of those concerns.
Hasn't the one, not mandate, but suggestion about enclosing the clear wells up there and everything and putting roofs over it and everything, that's been in there since 2000.
I believe you are correct, Mr. Coffey. Because
So it's
in
almost
that-
25 years that we haven't done it. We really haven't been cited for it.
No, because I don't believe it's a mandate.
It's not a
condition.
mandate,
It's
right.
a recommendation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we look at the capital budget, is there a way for you to distinguish, put an asterisk or whatever, what are the mandates, what are the things versus those that are a little bit more, have a little bit more discretion?
Sure,
So
we-
if we have to prioritize and make decisions, we can look at it that way.
Yeah,
If we
and-
have to.
We will, and I think we'll get a little bit deeper into that practice as we go through the capital budgeting process this year. But we have asked for prioritization from department heads, and prioritization takes into account some of the mandated requirements and the timing of those, what mandate has to come, what project has to come before the next project can go forward, as well as things like, there's no mandate necessarily to replace 50-year-old lines that run throughout the city. But we know that's a good practice for us to be doing and to get started on that. So those may fall from a prioritization factor lower on the list because they're not guided by a mandate of the EPA or a recommendation of our general plan. But we know they're important. That's the reason we have some of the issues we have because of the age and the lack of maintenance and replacement on some of those lines. So I think you're right to want to know and have some clear direction in a document that says, here's a priority item versus here's an item that, if we have to make some tough decisions, can fall to a later date. But the other aspect of what we'll be talking about, and I think will come up in this meeting, is what we incorporated into the rate study analysis to help us plan for the budgeting practices and what we can and can't do in the capital budget. Right now, as we sit before us and what you've been presented, we incorporated all of the aspects of recommendations into the budget plan documents at this point. We understand that we might have to back off of some of that, that might have been overly aggressive on our part, but that gives you, in one sense and time frame, the worst case scenario in terms of expenses and costs. And so we can move from that point sort of backwards to see what priorities we might need to make, what things are required or mandated, and what things are something that we have some control in terms of timing on. And so there was a little bit of a method to our madness in putting everything we could into the budget as we could, into the rate study analysis to plan for what would it take if we fully funded these items. And then from a debt issuance standpoint, what would we need to issue debt for? What wouldn't we do that? Some of that is still ripe for decisions, I would say, but in general, you have everything we know of, both from a department level as well as from an administrative level, and anything that's been referenced or incorporated in an EPA letter, a survey, or a general plan for the water treatment plant currently in those budgets. Again, subject to prioritization, subject to budget availability.
I appreciate all the hard work on the capital plan, so we have a better overall view of the obligations of the city so we can make good decisions. And this is going to be continuous, but I want to just make sure we keep trying to, and we're communicating well. Anybody else?
Good.
No, I totally agree with you. Because what I seen in there was some nice to haves, I think.
Yeah.
And we need to look at those nice to haves and knows what mandate and nice to haves are two different things, because that's a lot of money.
Yes, the capital improvement plan incorporates not only needs, but there are some wants, and the wants based upon best practices and what may in the future. But I think it's a reality that when you look at any municipal budget, there are things that have to be done, and there are things that decisions have to be made on when we do those things. Not saying that we won't ever, but that perhaps that's something that needs to be delayed or put off.
Plus, I mean, it's taken us a lot longer than 5 years to get into this situation. It's going to take us a lot longer than 5 years to get out of this situation. That's what we need to consider also, I think.
I think that's a fair statement. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, we'll move on then. Under the water rates, the rate study materials, of course, were provided. And on that, Mr. Testa, you want to take over here?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll reference also the sewer rate materials under the wastewater agenda item because they're kind of packaged the same.
Together.
So in both the water side and the sewer side, I provided the actual rate study, the final rate study that was completed by the consultants. So Dawn Lund and Utility Financial Solutions did the wastewater/sewer study. Baker Tilly did the water study. I also provided a copy of the presentation that each of those consultants gave during the council work session that we had just a few weeks back. And then I've got a note here about legislation request pending. So I have not submitted a legislation request yet. I have been working toward that. There's a lot of parts of that because those pieces of legislation are a little bit longer. But the intent would be to submit legislation for at least to be read in at the first meeting in September. To that end, what I did was I put together a couple of schedules that take all of the rate study suggestions and recommendations and calculations and kind of summarize them in one table so it's easy for you guys to see by line item what the current rates are, what the proposed rates would be, and what the change is. At a very high level, I can say this, that for an average customer using 5,000 gallons of water during a month, the increases, that would be water at 38% and sewer at 8.5%, would increase their bill approximately $163 a year, so about $13 a month. $2.60 on the wastewater sewer side, and then $11.04 on the water side.
That's what the 38% figure is.
It is. Now, I also want to make...
Is that the first year? I'm sorry, David.
It is.
That's just the first year?
That's
Okay.
correct. So in the sewer rate study, basically the plan was, or the recommendation, 8.5 for each of the, we could say 3 to 5 years, but I think we're going to get into the practice of doing a rate study every few years. So we're always looking at current data and current costs. But you could imagine over the next 3 years, 8.5, 8.5, 8.5. Under the water rate study, the numbers are bigger. So the recommendation would be 38% in year one. On top of that, then 28% in year two, and then 30% in year three. And part of that is, the water fund was just in worse shape than the sewer fund. To explain a little bit about, kind of how all of these pieces fit together, we actually started doing the rate studies toward the end of 2022. The reason that they were delayed is that we needed to provide them more complete list of capital projects. We were working on that. Obviously, we had some changes last year, and Matt made that a priority. So we were able to really put together a plan for a comprehensive financial capital plan. So we asked our managers to list everything under the sun that they have that would need to be replaced at some point over 15 years, to assign those to categories, years, and then within each of those for the first couple of years to prioritize those as to what was a very high need versus medium versus low. We have that information now, and that information was sent to both consultants, and the rate studies were updated on our most current costs for just the last year, but also to reflect all of the items and the sequencing or timing of the capital projects. So the list that was passed out to council a couple of months ago was basically the same list that was given to the consultants that was used to generate their rate recommendations. So what I would say is, I'd like to get some feedback on that, but the goal would be to submit legislation, at least for the first reading, at the beginning of September. And here's why I say that. So when we were looking at all of our projects, looking at our operating budget, looking at our fund balances, during the tax budget cycle, I built into those budgets an increase of 8.5% for the sewer and an increase of 30% for the water. I also built in those increases taking effect on October 1st of this year, meaning the last quarter of this year, and then the 2025 budget would have a full year's worth of data in there. Now, the reason for that is really to shore up the funds. Anything that we don't capture in a rate increase is likely to result in some type of internal or external debt. Some of the big projects that we have coming up, for example, the Brickyard project, a good portion of those costs, meaning about $5.5 million, would be borne by our utility funds, water, sewer, and electric, to pay for extension of lines and different pieces, parts of that. So basically, in order to accommodate the budget requests and to make sure we have a sufficient fund balance maintained at all times, and to reduce what would be our debt needs, we built that in there.
Currently, what is the average pay for 5,000 gallons with sewer and water? Because you gave the increase, but
Yeah.
do you know what that average cost is?
Well, I know that with water, it's about a little over $29. It's like $29.05 would be what the water bill portion would be for 5,000 gallons. And I'm going to look here through the other reports because I had that on the tip of my tongue.
And while you're looking, years 2 and 3's increases, how much would that be per month too? So we have an overall idea of what the cost is to the homeowners per month.
Yeah, so in the package that I had passed out, the agenda package, on page number 29, 28, and you don't need to turn to that,
Okay.
but I've highlighted and I put a red box in there pointing out what the dollar changes in the bill would be and the percent they represent. So we would go from current bill of $29.05. The 38% would increase that bill to $40.09. And again, this is just the water piece of that. Adding on to this year's increase, if we went to 38%, would be a 28% increase that would take us from $40.09 to $51.32. And then the last leg of this, which would be another 30% increase, would take us from $51.32 to $66.72. And again, that's in your packet, and I highlighted that to make it easy for you guys to find. It's going to be on page 28
Right
of your
there,
packet.
page 28. And then the sewer is a
Yeah.
lot less of it, but it's a higher bill? Is that a higher amount
you know,
to start with?
I don't. It's not jumping out at me, but let me provide that.
Okay.
So, Mr. Testa, just looking at the percentages like you described. So we're looking at 91% rise in the water bill over the next 3 years. Is that correct?
More than that.
That would be more than that, yeah.
So it'd be 100%?
Yeah, I mean,
105, yeah.
And then the sewer, another 25%? Is that correct?
yes, basically.
So
Yeah.
116% rise
Yeah.
plus in their utility bills.
Yes, I mean, you'd be looking, like I said, for a full year, if the 38% water and the 8.5% sewer were adopted, it would tack on about $163 for the whole year to the average residential bill.
What I'm concerned with is, like I said, about a third of our population is a fixed income. And this amount of hit with with property taxes and other things, that's what I have concerns with. And I'm trying to mitigate that to try to bring that in so it isn't such a big blow and so forth. That's what I want to be able to define and decide if we can, or discuss that if
Yeah,
we can.
and I think, you hit on a pretty salient point there is that, one of the things that we've experienced certainly through the pandemic is, the increase in the cost of construction. Certainly,
Right.
we've all seen, pretty high inflation over the last couple of years, higher than we've seen in a while. And that's had an impact not just on employee wages, but on contractor prices, on construction materials, on timelines, and all of those things. So in many ways, the rate increases kind of speak to, part of that being because we've seen a run up in costs, especially over the last few years.
So we kicked the can down the road. When was the last rate increase on water and the last one on sewer? Was it the exact same time? Or?
No, I don't think so. I think it's been probably at least 3 years. The last
4
rate,
or 5 years, I thought
the
it
last
was.
rate study I could find was from 2019, but
Did we
what
act
rate
on it?
increases might have happened before I started, I'm not exactly
I
sure.
think we've only raised them once since I've been on council. I think that was
10
like
years.
20.
Yeah, my understanding was it started off and then kind of fell by the wayside.
Yes, it did. Yep.
Proverbially kick the can down the road is what we've done.
But just like Mr. Parrish said, we have residents in this community that can't afford groceries, can't afford, medications. And to throw a 38% increase at them?
Over 100% every 3 years.
Yeah, over 3 years, but I mean, just that
Yeah.
first year. And
Yes.
they're reevaluating property this year here in the county. 2025, your taxes are going to go up.
Social Security
Yeah, that's
estimates for next year is like
2.4%.
2.24, yeah, is what that's,
Yeah,
which is
2.4.
not, of course, you'll never see the 8 or 9% that we saw a couple years ago, but it's supposed to be around 2.5% next year.
But I really think we need to take a hard look at some of these proposals before you even think about bringing an ordinance forward.
Yeah, good discussion on this, so we can, and like I said, with the capital budget, so we can see what
And we may have to
need.
pare that capital budget down.
And we may have to extend it out, unfortunately. Best practices, I'm all for government being involved with infrastructure and providing the best infrastructure and the best safety forces at all costs. And I think that's the role of government, but we also have to keep in mind the cost.
Yeah, and the capital budget was designed, put together with the flexibility that if we needed to do that, we can make some tweaks and do that without kind of throwing the baby in the bathwater out and having to start all over.
I'm
So
not
we've
saying
been,
throw it out. I mean, there's a lot of good
Yeah.
information here, but I think we need to structure it over a longer period of time. Like I told you, 5 years, it's taken us a lot longer to get into these issues in 5 years.
Yeah, I would just add in, and I don't think any of us here in the discussion disregard the fact that we have folks who are on fixed incomes in our community, we have folks that are struggling in our community. I think what we're trying to relay and make sure that the committee knows and council has all the information it needs to make a well-informed decision is that we realize that our rates are very beneficial to our users. But we also realize that we have system-related needs.
We need to catch up.
And we do need to do certain things. And so what the right course of action is, we brought in experts in their fields to help us with the rate study and tell us where we fall and where we fall compared to some other entities. I think it's important for us to take all of those things into consideration. Certainly our rate payers and our users and where they stand in terms of their own budgets and what they can afford and those things. But we also, and you all, as you know, have a duty to support the services that are provided by the city to our community. And in order to make sure we keep pace with those demands and what the systems need and what the operational and maintenance and capital related expenses are, we realize that we can't stay stagnant in terms of our rates and that we have to build growth into those rates. And what that really means is that people will have to pay more in terms of their rates over time. Certainly by extending the period of time, that's one approach that can be taken. But what that really means and what we have to be protect against is that we keep pace. I think a part of where we find ourselves in some of these areas are behind the 8 ball is because we have had rate studies that we have presented and looked at, and experts have told us, hey, in order to keep pace, you need to increase your rate by these. And we've decided for reasons that, hey, now is not the right time to do that. We can't continue to do that and provide the level of services and the update to our system and the reliability to these systems to our users without incremental change in the rates that they pay. And so I know you're hearing that loud and clear. You're not.
Yeah, I'm
pushing
not
back.
saying that we don't need to do some rate increases, but do we need to go this drastic of a rate increase I
Sure.
mean, like I said 15, 20 minutes ago, there's nice to haves and there's has to haves.
Sure.
Okay? And it's your job to bring everything to us.
That's right.
And then it's council's job to say, that's a nice to have. Justify to us why you have to have that.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know, that drives that 38% increase because
It does.
you said you put everything in there.
It does.
It's all there.
It is.
So as we start moving things backwards, that 38% could come down and become a more realistic, in my opinion.
As a highway revised code city, what are we stipulated about funding this? Can the general fund provide money? What are the different possibilities of funding it? Because as I've understood from our discussions, that the utilities are supposed to be self-funded and supposed to run be break even or make a small profit. And do we have any other options by law?
I'll certainly defer to the law department on the
Okay.
legal opinions, but I can tell you what my understanding of it. We have always operated our utilities as enterprise funds, and the enterprise nature of that is running it like a business. And so that's unique in that in a public service entity like a municipality, we don't have the ability to allow our cash reserve to build to such an extent where we might be subject to an accusation of price gouging or something of that nature. So in that regard, we're almost treated similarly to PUCO utilities in that you can't price gouge and you can't put really high numbers in terms of your ratepayer rates and then use all that money to fund improvements or operational changes down the road or whatever might happen. So we have to be cognizant of that aspect, meaning you have to grow your rate changes in accordance with the expenses and the anticipated work that you're going to do on your system. And so to a certain degree, that's got to be a factor in what you think about too, because if we decide to limit a % increase based upon moving a project back in terms of scheduling, then you're going to have to make up that difference in a shorter period of time later to pay for that particular expense. So on top of that, we've got to reuse the city's obligation and ability to pay debt to help us fund some of those improvements. And so you've got to be cognizant of where we stand in the overall position, cash position and debt capacity position of the city in order to make sure that you're planning appropriately and not short-changing sort of the revenue that comes from ratepayers as opposed to the debt issuance and where we're going to take debt and make debt payments from. You also have to build into your ability and your revenue stream, ability to repay that debt once you issue it. And that's got to be an enterprise obligation. It is not generally a good idea to use the general obligation abilities of the rest of the city to pay those enterprise-related capital investments. So it's a little bit of a complicated formula, but at the heart of it is making sure that ratepayers and the rates that we charge them are staying competitive with not only the needs and the bases of debt, but what the reality of our system-wide needs are. And so we've got to balance all of those factors in making these systems. They're not easy.
And they also have to be fair.
They do have to be
They have to be
fair.
fair with, other places or else we're going to lose residents.
They do. They do. And one of the things that's important to note is that I think you could take away from the presentations that were provided to council that we're pretty competitive and we're pretty fair when you compare us to external comparables in terms of our rates. And that is one of the reasons why I think we entered into the financial capability analysis on the wastewater side of the fence to say, hey, here are the arguments that we'd like to raise to have the most extended period of time to make improvements in that system. I would tell you that we heard from the EPA late last week, and we only were given 15 years, and somewhat reluctantly if you read between the lines in the language. So the reality is that's an acknowledgement that our rates are probably below the average or below where they need to be for ratepayers. And that's just one entity's observation, an important entity's observation, but one entity's observation of where we stand, at least on the wastewater side of things. So those are factors important, and I know council will consider all factors when coming up with what the right course of action would be.
From this discussion, I'm hearing that we're kind of hemmed in because of lack of rate increases in the past, as well as updating our system as we go, for whatever reason. And so we're kind of hemmed in by, we can't charge over, we can't, we haven't been able to take a lot of money and be able to set it aside every year. We can borrow money. That sounds either internally or externally. We can borrow money, but to be able to get this up to stuff so it isn't a problem in the future, we have to bite the bullet, it sounds like. And like I said, infrastructure and safety forces, I think, are vital for any city. So I hope we can have this discussion further about that, because it sounds like we're going to have to bite it. Now, as I remember from the presentation, right now we're at the low end of rates, where we are right now at $29, but once we went to $66 or $67, we'd be near the top in 3 years. Is that something I remember correctly?
Yes, but I would caution that, the point of clarity there is that is assuming no one else makes changes.
makes changes.
But, they're facing the same, construction costs and all of that. So, as we go up, they're likely to go up too.
Okay.
So I don't think it would put us toward, the very top, just because others would need to increase as well.
Yes. Okay, good. I'm glad we decided this.
Could I make one other comment? And Mr. Kotler, you're right, and all of the committee, you're right to be concerned about discussions where we're talking about 38% increases or 28% increases or the overall, 96% increase over 3 years. I do want to make sure, and I know you know this, and Mr. Testis made reference to it. Those are big numbers when you talk in terms of percentages. But if you talk about the overall dollar effect on that, it's still an increase. I'm not sitting here advocating that it's not an increase, but it's not the type of hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of increases over time. It's a little bit more reasonably based in terms of an increase. So when you looked at some of the numbers, and Mr. Testa went through it, in terms of the difference in the current rate versus the new proposed rate, we're talking about minimal dollars in terms of overall expenses to individuals. It's important, it's an increase, but I don't want to have you take away from this that it's, we're talking about a $400 increase on a monthly bill. That is not
That's
what
not
we are
what- that's not
proposing.
what-
That's not what we
No.
would be advocating. That's not what our independent consultants are advocating.
Right.
It's a different scenario. But those are intimidating percentage numbers
Yes.
when you just hear them in isolation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Anything further, Mr. Testa, on?
No,
Okay, then as far as any of the legislation, we'll wait for some further discussions on everything, committee.
I
But
think
before
we
we
still
even
need further discussion, personally. I mean, maybe a
Yes.
work session or something, and
go over,
you take the capital plan and go through there and look at the must-have, the EPA requirements all the way down. The prioritization that you ask the managers to do and how it compares.
And also,
Yeah.
instead of in 3 years, make it 5 years,
5
and
years.
maybe borrow some money or borrow over a different period of time or something, if we can, to lessen that
Impact.
impact,
Yeah.
even though we have to spend the money. And we can't push it down the road too much.
No,
We can't at all.
I'm not saying don't do it, but I think we need to look at it in a broader picture, In my past life, I would bring stuff to you, and you would make the decision whether it's going to go forward or not. Well, now I'm on the other side of the fence. But it's your job to bring that stuff to us, just like it was my job to bring it to you.
Yeah. And I think that's what we wanted to do. We've followed some of the, I think, longstanding requests to get you a capital budget and a plan
Yes.
that lists all these items. You've gone through and identified that some of these are wants and some are needs, and let's go deeper. You're
Let's
asking
go
to go to
deep,
the
yeah.
next step and see where we're at. And I think we're prepared to do that. What we were hoping to do was in a little bit of this style. Mr. Test and I were just speaking of this, and Ms. Fix too, perhaps it would be beneficial to change up the way we present budgets during the budget season and maybe have the department heads come in
Yeah.
and talk to you about the differences. So it's not just an administrator telling you this is a want versus a need. You actually can be part and parcel of hearing from our subject matter experts, the plant operators, for instance, or other experts in their fields.
I've asked for that for 11 years.
And so we can have those types of discussions. Maybe, if you're considering, and I'm springing this upon you, and certainly having presented to all of council, but maybe we have a week long of budgetary hearings or meetings where you get to hear from the department heads about why they're proposing different things and those types of things. So it's just a different way of going about what I think you're asking us to try to examine, and that is, tell us the why. Tell us what that is, what's needed, where'd you come up with that number, and what are our revenues to be able to pay for it.
How are we going to pay for it?
Yeah, and so those are part and parcel of a discussion, perhaps a change in the approach we do budgeting. I think what I'm hearing from you is because we realize, and as Mr. Testa said, we plugged into the tax budget a realization that there'd be some rate changes this year and then going into next year. If we're not going to be able to incorporate those rate changes this year, then we're going to need to do some adjusting as to how we come up with some of the revenues or what our revenue expectations may be. Perhaps it's more debt issuance, perhaps it's not doing a certain project at a certain time, whatever those may be. All I want to make sure is that we get from you clear direction as to next steps. So if you'd like us to move forward with the updated idea of hearing from department heads directly during the budgetary process, that would probably need to start in September at some point. If you're asking us to do something differently or want to have a work session before that, in terms of just us talking about alternatives or what to do and how to do that, that is something we could probably get on the calendar sooner than the end of September if you'd like. Just want to make sure I have some clear direction from the committee as to where you'd like to go.
My thought would be to bring not the directors, but the, managers in and let them present why they come up with these ideas and what those ideas going to cost. Is it a mandate? Is it a nice to have? Is it a want? Is it a need? Okay? And then look back at, the rate studies and stuff like that there. And I don't see it taking 3 months to, settle this. You got September, October, November. We don't pass a budget till December and then start collecting.
You're worried about the tax budget though, correct? Because
Well, it's not that
figures
I'm
were in
worried about the tax budget. The tax
No,
budget
that's
is
already
filed
done.
and we're
Right,
we're
right,
good.
right.
But as part of the tax budget, we put numbers in there that we are relying on and portraying to you that, hey, this is what it is. We were just telling you what Mr. Testa did, and what I support is that, hey, we thought we'd be implementing a rate change this year from October on, say. So we may not have that perfectly in place in October if we're going to go through a new budgetary process where we get to take a little bit more of a discussion and measure on projects and then determine what direction to go. You're probably going to need to make a decision on a rate change this year.
Yes.
And when that might happen, might be October-ish, might be November perhaps, not exactly sure. That's just going to affect the revenues that we had indicated we'd
That's all
have
it's
in
gonna
the
do.
tax budget. So it's going to result in reduced revenues, and we'll have to make sure that we have a plan on how to address that as we move forward. That's all.
I would be okay, Mr. Williams, I'd be okay with just the administrators presenting it to us than the actual department heads. I think just like you talked about, you related to Mr. Hitchcock, and Mr. Hitchcock then brought it to council. I would be okay with that, as long as we did it reasonably in depth. And then they aren't overworked. We aren't adding extra things to their things. And we're going to overwork you and Mike. But I think it might be.
Why I said the department managers though is because we got so much out of the tours that we went on.
Yes.
Those are the worker bees. Those are the people
Right.
that's doing the surveys, doing the inspections and stuff like that. You read the surveys, you read the inspections and all that kind of stuff. Not putting you down or anything, but you're not the hands-on people. The hands-on people is going to give you a lot more information to answer your questions.
If
Go
I
ahead.
might add something to the committee and administration, I think we have to explain to our citizens how this will benefit them. I mean, it's, here, you're gonna get this, in your tax, or your utility bill raised, the benefit will be a better service, or what, all in all. And I think the department heads can explain that to the committee.
Just my thought.
Yeah. In maybe a little bit more efficient way, no offense, but that's what they do every day.
Mr. Stedmeyer, you have a?
I mean, I would be fine as well if Matt produced it, but I mean, you have a good point there. I mean, as far as the people taking a look at it, but I mean, I'm with you. I agree. I mean, I'd be okay with Matt doing the presentation, but I mean, that's, either way.
We gave you mixed signals there.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I'm going to change mine then to department heads.
Well,
If that-
without you having to change yours, why don't we try something new?
Okay.
And it's not that it's just the newness of trying it. I think there is value. I watched all of you as you interacted on some council tours we put together, and I took away from that it was beneficial for you all in those processes and those interactions. So why not try to present it a little bit differently? I don't want to speak for Mr. Tesser, but we don't find any fault in you wanting to hear from those folks, and we'll be here to support those things. And those folks will understand that there's still a line of a chain of command between them to us and to you all.
Oh.
But I think it's worthy discussion, and they are the subject matter experts. And I don't take that the wrong way in those comments at all. I'm welcome to that. So if we can make sure that we can get their schedules aligned to come and meet with you in the evenings, let's try it. Let's try and go there. The only thing I would ask, and because of the work that Mr. Testa has done, and I support it, and the work that Ms. Fix has to do, and I have to make some decisions on, we need to do that sooner rather than later.
I agree.
To get these rates right, to understand what we can do debt-wise, or what we need to be doing debt-wise, to identify projects that will be moving forward, and others that perhaps might be moving back in the schedule of capital projects. We just need to get going.
Yeah.
So
Let's get started.
I think what we'll take away from it is we'll get together administratively, figure out a schedule, propose that to you all and other members of council, and see where we can go.
I think as a council, we've been successful at having a work session before our council committee of the whole. Designate an hour and start, probably the first meeting in September.
It's going to take longer than that, I think.
Well, I know, but that's
Yeah.
to get started.
I mean, just the first rollout of it or something.
If you don't mind, let us put our heads together and get you maybe a schedule and an idea of what we do, and we'll follow the lead as to what you'd like to do.
Yes. Yes.
All right, sounds good. All right. That will be all under water and wastewater. Next up is stormwater. Okay. Is there?
There's a few wastewater
Oh, I'm
project
sorry. Oh, I'm
updates
sorry.
if
Go
you guys
ahead.
would like them.
Oh, under the
They should be
projects,
pretty,
yeah.
should be pretty quick. The SSO 4 manhole installation and SSO 5 weir wall installation, those have all been submitted to the EPA for our permit to install. We received comments back actually pretty quickly on those, and I responded to those week before last, so I'm hoping we get approval on that and we can bid that this month yet. The 2023 sanitary sewer lining project is complete. There'll be a few punch list items most likely, but they lined the manholes and finished that up last week. So everything is completed there. And then the 2024 sanitary sewer lining project, we just signed the contract with that contractor last week, so we're waiting their schedule to kind of know. Substantial completion is set in January. So if it might depend on weather a little bit on that one, because it is a little finicky with rain and cold, but right now, tentatively end of January, it should be complete. And that is all for project updates.
Okay. And then the sanitary sewer the overflow program update. Okay. All right. Anything else in under wastewater that we have here? Okay. Then stormwater.
Yep,
Just
no
the-
report other than to say, we do have the next Stormwater Commission meeting scheduled for October 21st, prior to the Public Service Committee.
Okay. Under electric departments, any the updates there? I know you had attached some things there.
Yeah, and just out of respect for the lengthy agenda, I won't go over those in detail, but certainly entertain any questions you might have now or afterwards. What I do want to talk about, though, is the EV charging station. So the long story short is, as we started digging into the contract, we discovered that there is no maintenance. There's not a 5-year, covered maintenance. And my understanding from talking to the manufacturer is that the original plan with NOACA in their RFP was to include some type of equipment maintenance warranty as part of the plan. And in fact, Flow, the manufacturer, provided that as part of their RFP response. Somewhere after they got going on this, NOACA decided they weren't going to purchase that piece, I think because it was more expensive than they had anticipated, but they never really changed the communications and updated everybody else. So as we were going through the contract and had questions, I had a couple opportunities to talk directly with the Flow folks, and it sounds like what NOACA basically is paying for 5 years is the software maintenance, basically the license for the software, but there's no equipment maintenance. Because this was such a surprise to so many people, Flow said, okay, we'll make available for a price the maintenance equipment warranty to basically the sub-grantees, but only if you did not turn on your charging station yet. So in that respect, we were fortunate because we hadn't done that. And in fact, they advised us that if we wanted any type of coverage, we shouldn't do that. They've sent us the quote. The quote's $16,400. That would cover both standard charging point ports and the fast charger, and that would be a single price for the whole 5-year period. A couple thoughts on that, and I've not heard back yet, Tom, on the acts of God cost, but they basically said, look, anything that would cause the equipment to be inoperable or operate at less than its peak capacity, we would cover 100% of the cost. And it's, somebody were to back into it with their truck and damage something, they would handle that. If there were problems where the equipment just wasn't working right, they would handle that. Absent the purchase of the warranty, all of that would be entirely at our cost. The only thing that would not be covered under the warranty would be things that they deem to be just aesthetics. So if somebody were to spray paint on it and it didn't impact the function, or if somebody somehow scratched it and didn't affect its function, they wouldn't cover those things. But it sounds like it's a good deal. It sounds like it's the only game in town if we want protection for the machine. My thought would be that if we decide to move forward with the purchase of that, of course, that would be built into the rate
I was going to
as
say,
well.
we'd have to build this into the rate
Yeah.
that we originally talked about.
We would. In fact, the next item about the 3-month rate review, we're coming up on, kind of the 3-month calendar month due date on revisiting that. But that assumed that we were going to be open for the last 3 months. Because of all the delays that we've had with this, my recommendation to council would be, well, let's kind of hold the rate as it is now and look at it at the beginning of January. So again, we get some denominator of usage that we can spread these costs over. As I look at it, it's, not just the replacement cost of the station, which probably in about 10 years could be a couple $100,000, but it's the warranty costs as well as the fee that they're taking out. So basically, in real simple terms, if a customer used the station, generated a $1 charge, that goes to Flow and they remit 85 cents to us. And again, I think that was a surprise to some folks. So what we would do is then determine what those costs are and add that piece back in, which they, Flow thought was a good idea. I've got a large part of the analysis framework put together. Again, the key piece that would be missing is the usage denominator, because ideally, the costs are borne by just the users of the station as opposed to all electric customers. So the legislation request that has been submitted is for supplemental appropriation for a one-time purchase of $16,400 to cover a 5-year warranty period on the station equipment.
As I recall, when we discussed putting this in, that the cost of the city would be nothing at the time.
That is correct.
And so did they bait and switch us with the contract? Or, I mean, I don't want to use that stronger language, but I just did.
Well, I have been waiting for some feedback from NOACA, and they haven't. They're putting together a list of, frequently asked questions, but they've not gotten back to us. So I ended up going directly to the manufacturer. And what I shared about, the warranty and it being part of the RFP, and that apparently they didn't change their communications, that was directly from the manufacturer based on their interactions with NOACA. So, yeah, I mean.
So why don't we just tell them to come and get it?
Yeah.
Yeah, why are we liable?
Why are we
Liable for
charging our
And
public
when all of a sudden
$16,000 automatically?
If
If it doesn't get used, we're still on this.
to.
Yeah.
Because we
We're still on the hook for this.
Yeah, we agreed to do this.
With no charge.
No cost.
Because there wouldn't be cost to the city, or very, very limited, maybe, pennies.
Mr. Testa, what's the cost of that machine, the equipment? Not installation and all, just the cost of it?
Approximately, not including our time for the electrical hookup,
Right.
about $140,000. So inflating that out 10 years would be a little over $200,000 for replacement cost.
And there, right now, of course, because of that denominator factor of usage, we really don't know how much, number one, if the dollar charge would have to go up, or how much to add to that dollar to cover
To
the
get usage,
$16,000. Now, and it wasn't the, and there was and I would almost like maybe to ask, in that insurance quote, what the slow charge was like $900 and the fast charge was
Yeah.
like $14,000?
That's right. So they originally
That
provided
just
a
seemed,
quote.
I mean, I understand it'd be different, but that's a decimal point off there,
So originally, they provided a quote of $900 a port, and they had made reference to something if we wanted the fast charger warranty. Well, I had given them information on all 3 of our chargers. So I went back to them and I said, could you please confirm that this $2,700 covers everything? And they came back at that point and said, oops, we made a mistake. It is $900 for each of the standard chargers, but it's the, whatever, $14,000 for the fast charger. So that's how we got to $16,000.
Yeah, I mean, that
Sounds
just
a little fishy.
That seems like just a big jump. I mean,
Yeah.
14,000 as opposed to 900. I mean,
Now, there is one element where we, potentially would get some of that money back. So the service level agreement, and it would be based on different things that might happen. They would have X amount of time to come and address it. And if they didn't meet that target, then we would get half of that year's payment back. So in other words, in very simple terms, let's say it was $15,000 over the span of 5 years. Breaks out to $3,000 a year. If they missed one of those service level agreements, we'd get $1,500 back that year. But
and by agreement, you mean if they don't respond to an issue we have within a certain period of time,
That's
that would
correct.
be a failure. That would so the equipment would have to break, and they would have to not show up in time for us to recoup any of the money. So,
A further question, if that company were to go out of business, does that maintenance warranty transfer to another company then? Because the way what I'm seeing contractually, I am not real confident in that company.
So, in prior committees, I've asked, the other one that I know we have in this county is Medina. Do you have data, how many cars they're charging or how much usage they're having? Were you able to get any of that data?
Yeah, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but I did talk to Nino. Although I didn't get the usage data, and it's probably been a couple months. They were much closer to, just I think it was like 15 cents, something where they're covering like the cost of the supply, but again, they're not they also don't have an electric department that needs to be supported.
How much usage is it getting, though?
I don't know.
See,
I
that's
don't
the whole
know.
key. If it's
The usage.
16,400 a year for a policy, and you're getting
For 5
Yeah,
years.
it's
minimal,
Over 5.
or even over 5,
Yeah.
and you're getting minimal usage, there's no value.
When the other thing too with that is, we were talking about adjusting the rates. Well, if the rates have to go up, then we're also playing catch up. We almost have to be high to start with and come back down, or over the next 5 years, we're playing catch up the entire time, like we were just talking about the water rates, and we don't want to get in that situation either.
So that could be a self-fulfilling prophecy that what it takes to recoup our costs is at a price point that would deter people from using it, which then,
Well,
cycles back over a smaller denominator.
we can make it just an economic decision. It's,
Other cities having the same issues as according to, contractually.
Well,
I should say.
at least my understanding is with this kind of deal through NOACA, that was the case. And I got the impression too that, Flow was a little surprised because that's what they thought was an RFP. That's what they responded with, and it was kind of late in the game when NOACA changed that. But it does sound like that, just based on everybody's response, that wasn't communicated because every other community was thinking the same thing. Oh, this is an equipment maintenance warranty. We're not going to have to do anything to take care of it.
Then nothing's free.
so what do you guys think about the moving the legislation through and adding it into the cost, or?
I'm not for that right now.
I'm not for that right now.
So, and that's okay. I just want to say that, I would like to get direction as to, do we turn on the station and not have this opportunity, or do we leave the station off while we think about the warranty? Because once the station's turned on, the warranty opportunity goes
gone,
away.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, and the other choice is we pay for it, we take a risk and don't get the insurance and pay for it and do the maintenance, pay for it or pay them to come in and fix it if it breaks.
That's not an option.
Yeah, I think the bigger issue is more if somebody hits it or does something, that damages it, then, they certainly have an incentive to keep the thing up and running because they're getting 1% of every
They're
sale.
getting 15%, right?
Yes.
My suggestion would be not to turn it on yet.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, well, that's it. Okay, that's it. All right, next up on there, I believe, is the 3-month rate review.
Yep, so there's,
Do
On
that,
that,
January.
just as far as just going, again,
January.
just same thing with that, moving down there. Yep. Under CityLink then, the subscriber update and fiber update.
yep, those are the graphs back on,
Right.
toward the page 70 there. It's notable, you'll see that our internet subscribers, really, we've had a pretty solid year. It's an upward trend. We're even picking up some of the cable subscribers, I think, as word gets out, as we're finishing, more pieces, parts. We're working toward the piece where we're going to basically be switching everybody in Weatherstone over to the Wi-Fi system, and that'll be, it's kind of unique in the way that subscribers would be added because everybody gets put on the Wi-Fi. It takes a while to do all the underground work, but once that's done, everybody gets on. It's like a big group gets on at once. But the project is probably going as well as it could. Made a lot of success. They've probably provided the infrastructure to what they say past about 1,500 homes at this point, meaning that the infrastructure and the cabling from the contractors. Now we're still working certainly on the installs, but so far so good.
Good, good. Good update.
All right. Then we'll jump into other here, the building inspection fees.
Yep, so,
Mike, I can speak to that. So quickly, in terms of this legislative item, so as I think most of the committee members know, our building code enforcement officer has left the city, and so we are relying on our relationship with Medina County to do the building and electrical inspections for the time being. Obviously, that was not a budgeted expense into the nature that I believe we're going to have in the coming months. So we wanted to get an appropriation of $8,500 to allow us to continue the relationship with the county for the time being before we find a permanent solution to that vacancy.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we move this to our full council meeting tomorrow night.
Well, if-
I second.
Okay?
Okay. All in
And-
favor? Or
Wait,
can we do that tomorrow? Is that a little quick, or
No, we.
or the legislation is prepared and everything? Okay.
I had one question, though. Do we have enough money to pay for the rest of the month, or do we need to suspend and call this?
No, we could use the suspension and call, we have enough to get through the end of the month.
Okay.
But suspending and calling it would be helpful
Yeah, and
as we
suspending.
prepare for the
Yeah,
future.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with that, yeah. All right,
With the
okay.
recommendation to suspend and call.
With an emergency, make sure there's an emergency clause in legislation. All right. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign. Okay, we'll get that on the agenda. Next item up is the utility bill credit card fees. Mr. Testa, you want to?
So every year, we budget monies to pay transactional fees from residents, businesses, customers that pay their utility bills, either using a credit card, a debit card, or an e-check service. This year, starting around basically the first week in February, we switched to a new processor, and it was kind of a little bit of a kind of the gun to the head proverbial switch, because the company Tyler as a company came out with Tyler Payments, which is their piece is part of software that works with our existing accounting system, New World. So some years ago, Tyler bought New World. And they're heading in the direction of basically, I think, trying to get people to migrate to one of their new products. But what they did when they came out with Tyler Payments is they said, look, all these other payment processors that you've been working with that have been able to tie into your accounting system, we're not going to support that anymore. So we went with Tyler Payments, and their fees that we went through, a little bit higher, but nothing drastic. But we've had some hiccups. There was some issues back and forth for the first few months of this year, where we weren't sure that their billing was going, they were processing the billing correctly. And at some point we got a pretty large hit for fees, and I'm talking a $100,000 hit for fees. But it's been difficult to determine with the back and forth that we've had with them if those fees have been accurate. I mean, are the fees higher than we were led to believe, or are they reasonable? It's just you're misapplying them. So right now, Susan Hale, who's the manager, and myself are doing an audit of all of those fees. The request before you for the supplemental appropriation is to cover fees probably for the next 2 or 3 months, unlikely for the rest of the year, but we're hoping for a couple things. Either we're going to find some issues with the way they've been billing and get a big credit. That's on one side, and then alternatively, we have been meeting with some other potential vendors that think that they might be able to tie into New World and do that more cheaply. But the urgency here, and the reason that the request would be to suspend and call, is because toward the beginning of September will be the next time that they take out fees.
If you find a fault on their part, can we put in a clause that they'll pay us interest on that money? Because we're advancing them money, just like a bank would. And, like if we're late, they're trying to charge us 2%, 2%, 30. So let's see if we can recoup it with interest.
Yeah, and we've had a little bit of an issue, and Ms. Fix could speak to it more, but, they've not been good about when they've been remitting stuff to us, of meeting kind of the, basically the government deadlines. You got to get it to us in a certain amount of time. They've been a little bit lax. Personally, my thoughts were, it seems like they jumped into this and they're trying to cut their teeth a little bit as they go
They're trying to make
forward.
it work as they go.
Yeah, but there's probably between Visa and MasterCard and Chase Bank and this Tyler, there's probably 100 and some pages of fees that some are supposed to be in there, some are not. It's not been clear. It should be X amount of transactions times this plus this fee. Here's our fee, and that's what we are going to get to the bottom of. And at some point, we're either going to get it fixed, or we're going to have to move to someone else. Yeah.
Again, I want to reiterate, if we are to be remitted funds, we should be charging interest on that back, because we're loaning them money.
Yeah.
It's not like the federal government where you have to give a certain amount of, for taxes. If you loan them money and they give it back to you, they're not going to pay it, but they are the federal government.
Good point.
Okay.
Yep, so I would offer up that
Okay.
if we find that out, I will press for that.
Good.
All right, then we want to move this legislation on to City Council with an emergency clause.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Do you want to try and get this on do you have it prepared for tomorrow night?
Yes.
I know that's kind of quick for Julie, but I mean, if...
No, it's prepared.
Okay, it's all prepared. All right, we'll try and we'll do that for tomorrow and suspend and call then. All right, and then under the utility procedures analysis, Ms. Fix, I believe that's why you are here.
Yes. Last year, prompted by Bruce Darlington, who was the chair of public service, and some discussions with Bob Thurber, the council president, we engaged a firm, Juliana Group, to do some agreed upon procedures to take a deeper dive into the internal controls in the utility department. Because when you look at the number of transactions that flow through there and the dollar volume of those transactions, it's very high. The internal controls are the safety net that protects the assets of the city and ensure that the employees are following the procedures and policies. So they did their work, and we had them look at various areas where we thought there was the highest potential for risk, for potential loss. It resulted in some findings. I don't know if you had a chance to read
I've looked
through
through some
that.
of them, yes.
Some of them.
I can go through each one, each finding, and give you the action that has been taken or is in process or is to be completed. But my role is to follow up on those and make sure that they're...
Can you send that list to us?
Yeah.
Yes.
Would you do that?
Yes.
That'd be great.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'll follow up on the incomplete items.
About how many were there? Just, well,
10.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay, Mike, yeah, okay.
About 10, I see.
The only other item that I have, which is maybe not on the agenda, it's quick, the 23 audit was completed for the city. The outside auditors did that. There was one management letter item that I will send out to council. I thought I would just bring it while I'm here, but I will send it out to council as well. And that item was in the utility department, that the winter rates for electric were not adjusted in the summer months. So June through September, we underbilled customers. It was an immaterial amount. I don't even have that amount. I can find out if you'd like it.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the amount was.
Immaterial would be less than 2% of the total revenue. I can get that number, but so they were here in 2024 looking at 23, and they noted that the city did implement a calendar reminder to confirm that those seasonal rate changes are being made.
Yeah, I will personally follow up with the utility billing manager on the scheduled date changes.
Okay, all right. All right,
That's everything. I have.
okay. Any other questions from this one? Okay, all right. Thank you much. And then employee compliments there, Mike? Do you want to?
Yep, we
Anything?
had a couple of nice comments. We had a customer who called to give us feedback on two of our CityLink installers, and she offered up that they were amazing, efficient, very clean, and best of all, made her laugh. And she's talking in particular about Aaron and Brandon. We also received some correspondence, a letter where someone was basically saying, hey, I would like to thank the electric department for the people that, they've sent out. This person just goes on to say, all of you are awesome. All of you are so very appreciated. When we go down, which is very seldom, we're always back up and running in less than an hour. What awesome service. And then, I don't think another electric company operates this. And of course, in light of some recent outages with First Energy, I think that may have prompted it because this is a relatively recent one. So a couple nice comments that citizens shared.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Anything else anything other here this evening? All right, our next meeting will be September the 16th. I look, there's no conflicts or anything on around that date. September the 16th, Monday, 5:30 here in these chambers. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.
Thank you for the marathon.
It's 6:45.
Yeah, this was a big one. This was a long one.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.